It's the middle of the afternoon. The sky is clear. You're somewhere in what will eventually be called China or Mesopotamia or Mexico. It doesn't matter. You're outside doing what you do every single day. Maybe you're grinding grain. Maybe you're watching children. Maybe you're just sitting in the sun the way humans have always sat in the sun, letting the warmth hit your face, not thinking about anything in particular, and then something happens that has no name yet. The light changes. Not like a cloud passing, not like sunset coming early. Something else. Something wrong. The shadows get sharp in a way they've never been sharp before. The color drains out of the world. Not to black, but to something worse. A bruised yellowish gray that doesn't exist in any other moment in nature. Birds stop. Not gradually. All at once. The insects go quiet. The temperature drops several degrees in the span of minutes. Animals that were grazing lift their heads and stand completely still, and you don't know why, but that stillness frightens you more than anything else. You look up. The sun is being eaten. That is not a metaphor. That is the literal thought. Something is eating the sun. There is a dark shape taking bites out of the most permanent thing in your universe, the thing that has risen every single morning of your entire life without exception, the thing your entire understanding of time and safety and the continuation of existence is built around. And it is going away. Within minutes, it is gone, replaced by a black circle rimmed with fire hanging in a sky that is now showing you stars at noon. Stars. In the middle of the day. Your brain has no category for this. It has no prior experience to reach for. It has no elder who warned you this was coming, no story that prepared you, no framework that makes this make sense. There is only the raw biological signal screaming up through every layer of your nervous system. Something has gone catastrophically wrong with the world. Here's what most people get wrong about ancient humans and eclipses. We assume the fear was superstition. We assume it was ignorance. We assume that if they had just known what we know, they would have been fine. But that assumption misses something important. Something that the science of how the human brain processes existential threat makes very clear. Their reaction wasn't irrational. It was the only rational response available to a mind with no other explanation. And what they did next? What humans did all over the world, independently, across thousands of years, tells us something about ourselves that is still true today. Let's talk about what was actually happening inside that person's body. Because the fear wasn't just psychological, it was chemical, it was physical, it was ancient in a way that goes deeper than culture or language or anything learned. When the light starts to fail mid-afternoon in a way that has no precedent, the human brain does something very specific. It doesn't reason, it doesn't analyze, it triggers. The amygdala, the part of your brain that has been handling existential threats since long before you were human, fires before your conscious mind has even registered what's happening. Cortisol floods the bloodstream. Adrenaline follows. Heart rate spikes. Pupils dilate. Muscles prime for movement. Your body is getting ready to run from something it cannot see and cannot name, which is in many ways the most terrifying kind of threat there is. Scientists who study fear responses have a term for this. Anticipatory anxiety. The dread of an outcome you can feel coming but cannot predict or control. And the specific conditions of a total solar eclipse hit every single trigger for that response simultaneously. The temperature drop, the sudden silence of animals, the wrongness of the light. Each of those alone would be unsettling. Together, they create a sensory experience that the human nervous system reads as catastrophe, even when the conscious mind is trying to stay calm. Which is why people today, people who know exactly what an eclipse is and have watched videos and bought certified safety glasses and driven 4 hours to get into the path of totality, still report being overwhelmed when it actually happens. Still feel the hair stand up. Still hear themselves making sounds they didn't plan to make. Now take that same neurological event and put it in a mind with no explanation available. Researchers who study how ancient peoples interpreted natural phenomena make a point that sounds simple but cuts deep. The human brain does not tolerate a vacuum of explanation. When something happens that threatens survival, the mind will generate a cause even if no accurate cause is available. Because a wrong explanation is neurologically preferable to no explanation. A wrong explanation gives you something to act on. No explanation leaves you completely helpless, which to the threat detection systems of the brain is the worst possible state. So the explanations came. Fast. And they came from every corner of the world, independently, without contact between civilizations separated by oceans and centuries. And the fact that those explanations were so strikingly similar to each other tells us something remarkable, not about the sky, about us. Here is the part that should stop you cold. Civilizations that had absolutely no contact with each other, separated by oceans, by mountain ranges, by thousands of miles of territory, and thousands of years of independent development, looked up at the same disappearing sun and arrived at the same explanation. Something is consuming it, something hungry, something that can be stopped. In ancient China, the eclipse was a celestial dragon devouring the sun. Citizens would pour into the streets, banging drums, shooting arrows into the sky, making as much noise as humanly possible to scare the creature away. Imperial astronomers, whose entire job was predicting these events, were executed if they failed to warn the emperor in time, not because the emperor was cruel, but because an unprepared population meant uncontrolled panic, and uncontrolled panic in a city of millions is its own kind of catastrophe. In Norse mythology, two wolves named Skoll and Hati chased the sun and moon across the sky. An eclipse meant one of them was catching up. The response was the same as in China. Noise, screaming, banging, drive it back. The Inca looked up and saw the sun god Inti being attacked. The Maya had a celestial serpent swallowing the sky. Indigenous tribes across North America described giant animals, bears, mountain lions, cosmic predators taking bites out of the light. Vietnamese folklore described a frog. Ancient Koreans described fire dogs. The specific animal changed. The core narrative did not. Something is eating the sun, and humans must intervene to make it stop. This is not coincidence. This is not cultural diffusion. These stories developed independently in populations that never spoke to each other. What it is a window directly into the architecture of the human mind under pressure. When faced with a sudden, total, terrifying loss of the most reliable thing in existence, the mind reaches for the most familiar explanatory framework it has: agency, hunger, attack, things that can be fought. Because if something is attacking the sun, then making noise might actually help. You have a role, you have an action, you are not helpless. The alternative, that the sun is simply gone, that the universe has shifted in some fundamental and permanent way, that there is nothing to do, is neurologically intolerable. So every culture independently chose the dragon, independently chose the wolf, independently chose the fight. And here is the thing that makes this genuinely astonishing. They all won. Every single time. The noise was made, the drums were beaten, the arrows were fired, and the sun came back. That feedback loop, action followed by relief, repeated across generations, became some of the most durable mythology the human species ever produced. Let's talk about what people actually did, not the mythology, the behavior, the specific documented, sometimes extraordinary things that humans did in the minutes before, during, and after a total solar eclipse. Because the stories are one thing, the actions are something else entirely. In ancient China, the protocol was formalized to a degree that is almost bureaucratic in its detail. When an eclipse began, a specific sequence of events was triggered at the imperial court. Drums were beaten in a precise rhythm. Officials dressed in particular colors took particular positions. The emperor himself was required to stop eating, stop conducting business, and stand in a designated place facing a designated direction until the sun returned. This was not optional. This was law. The eclipse had a procedure, and the procedure had to be followed exactly, because the last time someone improvised, the sun had still come back, but you couldn't be certain that was a coincidence. In Mesopotamia, the stakes were even higher and considerably more personal. Babylonian astronomers were sophisticated enough to predict eclipses with reasonable accuracy, using centuries of recorded observations. But prediction didn't reduce the danger, it just gave them time to prepare, and their preparation involved something genuinely remarkable: a substitute king. When an eclipse was coming, a stand-in would be placed on the throne. A prisoner, sometimes a mentally ill man, sometimes a captured enemy, dressed in royal robes, treated as king for the duration of the dangerous period. The real king hid, because the omens were clear. The eclipse threatened the king specifically. So you gave the eclipse a different king and hoped it wasn't paying close enough attention to notice the switch. The substitute was later killed. Just to be thorough, across the ancient world, wars stopped. This is documented. Greek historians recorded battles that paused mid-combat when the sky went dark, both sides standing in the blood-soaked field, looking up. suddenly finding themselves in agreement that whatever was happening up there was more important than whatever they had been fighting about. The Battle of Halys in 585 BC, a war between the Lydians and the Medes, was ended on the spot by a solar eclipse. Herodotus records it. Two armies, mid-battle, watched the day turn to night and simply stopped. Laid down their weapons, made peace. The eclipse did in minutes what years of war had failed to do. That is the scale of what we are talking about. Not superstition, not ignorance, power. The eclipse had genuine power over human behavior at every level of society, from emperors to soldiers to farmers standing in suddenly darkened fields, looking up at something they had no words for and doing the only thing available to them, acting together, as loudly as possible. On April 8, 2024, a total solar eclipse crossed the United States from Texas to Maine. Millions of Americans drove hours, booked hotels months in advance, stood in fields and parking lots, and on rooftops in small towns they had never visited before and would never visit again. They had the glasses, they had the apps. They had NASA live streams and physics textbooks, and a complete scientific understanding of exactly what was about to happen down to the second. And then totality hit, and people wept. Not a few people, not the unusually emotional ones. Crowds of adults who came prepared, who knew the mechanism, who could explain the geometry of it to their kids on the drive over, stood in the sudden wrong darkness and felt something come loose inside them that they did not expect and could not entirely explain afterward. Videos from that day show strangers grabbing each other's arms, people laughing and crying at the same time, a silence falling over crowds of thousands the moment the last sliver of light disappeared, a silence that felt less like quiet and more like the whole world holding its breath. This is the thing that the ancient explanations were actually tracking, not the astronomy, the experience, the raw, physical, neurological experience of standing under a disappearing sun. They didn't have the science, but they had the feeling exactly right. Something enormous is happening. It demands a response. It connects everyone present in a way that ordinary moments do not. The next total solar eclipse visible from the continental United States comes in 2044. That is not very far away, and when it crosses the sky, people will do what people have always done. They will stop what they are doing. They will go outside, they will look up, they will feel something move through them that has no clean modern name, something older than language, older than cities, older than any explanation anyone has ever offered for what the sun going dark in the middle of the day actually means. The ancient human banging a drum in a darkened field and the American standing in a parking lot in paper glasses are separated by thousands of years of accumulated knowledge. The eclipse itself has not changed. The sky has not changed. And whatever happens in the human body and the human mind in the moment the light fails, that has not changed either. They looked up. You look up. The feeling in between is the same feeling. It has always been the same feeling. That is not a small thing. That is the whole thing.